At the tender age of 16, this girl, who we will call Jen to protect her identity, should be in school. She dropped out in Senior 1 at a school in Kamuli district after she was allegedly defiled by her uncle early this year. On the day he is accused of carrying out the offense of aggravated defilement, her uncle picked her from her granny's home to help him do house chores as his wife was away in Kampala.
He gave me soda in a glass to drink. I told him the soda smells like alcohol. He told me that it was a new soda on the market. When I drank it, I lost consciousness. In the morning, he told me that I should not tell anyone what had transpired during the night.
Jen is now 5 months pregnant. In a travesty of justice, her uncle, a senior detective officer who is supposed to enforce the law, remains scot-free as his juniors are afraid of probing him.
He told my grandmother that the family should hold a meeting to discuss the matter. The family decided that my uncle and I should bathe in herbs. If he defiled me, then he would die. If he did not, then it is me who will die. I just walked away.
Kamuli, an impoverished sugarcane growing belt in the Busoga sub-region, was ranked the 4th among districts with the highest prevalence of teenage pregnancy, behind Wakiso, Kampala and Kasese. In the district, in the 2020-2021 financial year, 6,523 girls between the ages of 15 to 19 attended their first antenatal visit. From July 2022 to March 2023, 4,493 girls attended their first antenatal visit. A number of societal and patriarchal biases are associated with the prevalence of teenage pregnancy across the country. Dr. James Wako, the district health officer for Kamuli, says the biggest driver is cultural norms, where the transition from childhood to adulthood includes marriage and giving birth.
There are communities, for example, where one, if these girls reach a certain age and their peers are already married, they are also compelled. You see the physiology takes over, their body shapes change, and then they say, why can't we get money?
In Mayuge district, this girl, who we will call Irene, is 8 months pregnant. She is 16 and she dropped out of school 3 years ago due to lack of school fees. Irene was seduced by a migrant worker who abandoned her when she conceived. She doesn't know his name or his phone number.
He seduced me by buying me expensive things. I decided to love him. When I told him I was pregnant, he denied responsibility and abandoned me. I don't know where he is or where he comes from. My mother told me to abort the pregnancy, but I refused.
Her parents suspect that the migrant worker infected Irene with HIV. However, Irene denies this, although she admits that she contracted a sexually transmitted disease she does not disclose.
I have 2 diseases. I have an STD and diabetes. The diabetes is hereditary, but he gave me the STD.
Several policy documents are indicative of the nexus between poverty, teenage pregnancy, and exposure to risky sexual behavior because a number of rural families are unable to keep girls in school. For instance, 35% of girls aged 15 to 19 years with no education have already had a baby, compared to 11% of girls who have more than secondary education.
In our communities, there are people who have some money, especially the borders, taximen, and in our region here, there are people who are growing sugar cane. These are people who are getting money on a daily basis. And guess what? The communities where they stay is where they will be spending this money. So, some of these people also go and end up engaging these girls.
Dr. Wako says that poor townships, which have sprouted across urban centers, increase the vulnerability of girls.
They are residing large families in a simple one house, the mother, the kids, the father. Now, that aspect, which is social aspects, issues begin later in the night. These kids are listening and they are able to see whatever is happening. So eventually, these kids also want to experiment and see.
While the coronavirus, which burrowed across the country in March 2020, necessitating closure of schools for nearly 2 years, compounded the problem. For long spells, Uganda has had one of the highest teenage pregnancy incidences in Sub-Saharan Africa. Globally, the country ranks 16th among countries with the highest rates of child marriages and teenage pregnancies.
A lot of the effort which has been going on was disrupted by the recent pandemic, when children had to stay out of school for a long time. We had an influx and the numbers just kind of shot up. That was a big setback, and I'm sure in the current UDHS we might be able to get that kind of background noise.
A 2020 survey by UNICEF on violence revealed that over the last 45 years, more than half of the girls have experienced childhood sexual abuse, which may also explain the unchanging level of teenage pregnancy in the country. The inefficiencies and complicity in solving sex-related crimes is the main institutional driver of teenage pregnancy. Michael Kasada, the Busoga North Regional Police spokesperson, says cases of defilement are the highest reported criminal cases in the region.
So far this year, we've recorded a number of 207 cases of defilement. But we believe there are more that are not even reported. And out of the 207, we've taken 56 to court, only 56.
Sexual violence increased from 22% in 2016 to 36% in 2020. That alone is a wake-up call, ladies and gentlemen.
Police crime reports for 2020, 2021 and 2022 show that a Ugandan under the age of 18, majority of whom are girls, is sexually abused every 42 minutes across the country. But oftentimes, the wheels of justice grind slowly for such reported cases. The latest police crime report, released in February this year, details that out of the 12,580 defilement cases recorded in 2022, only 4,752 cases were taken to court. 817 cases were not proceeded with, while 7,041 cases remained under inquiry on top of those registered during the preceding years. Of the 4,843 defilement suspects arrested during the same period, 4,502 were still awaiting trial.
We have people who take very long to report. Sometimes they delay in negotiations. After negotiations fail, that's when they will come. Some come to police to help them press the perpetrator to get the money. We only disappoint them that we are taking the legal procedure, and such people will end up disappearing.
We need strong enforcement. They have to decree that if this thing happens, we must use the long arm of the law to address this. Because we have talked, so what? Otherwise, we shall continue lamenting, pushing in the money, and for us who are enlightened, we will go to a seminar, come back with the same information. You invite the same people, why can't the enforcers enforce this aspect?
16-year-old Olivia lives in the outskirts of Kampala city, and she has a 10-month-old baby. One day, as she was returning home from school, she was defiled by a boda rider who had given her a lift.
I tried to fight him off, but he was too strong. He hit me, and because I feared to be beaten, I submitted to him. After a month, I realized I had not had my period. When my mother took me to hospital for a checkup, the doctor discovered I was pregnant.
Olivia had a C-section delivery because her body was not ready to push the baby. To date, she still owes the clinic dues.
The clinic asked us for $300,000 for the C-section, My father's clan was angry, but they told us not to go to police because the crime had already been committed and there is no going back.
Wow.
Teenage pregnancy is responsible for 18% of the annual births in Uganda. Furthermore, teenage pregnancy contributes to 20% of the infant deaths and 28% of the maternal deaths. Angela Nakafero, the Commissioner, Gender and Women Affairs in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, says limited access to sexual reproductive health information and services by adolescents is a major factor contributing to unwanted pregnancy.
Whoever is campaigning against sexuality education for our young people, we are not doing a service, we are doing a disservice for our young people, especially in the context of high levels of sexual violence in this country. But it's very important that age-appropriate and cultural-sensitive sexuality education is rolled out in this country.
The decision to allow sexually active teenagers to access and use contraceptives is controversial, with conservative sections of the public, including the clergy, arguing that this will give girls the green light to engage in premarital sex.
We have a slightly restrictive policy. Our main policy is really abstinency, including, but there are some teenagers, especially the elderly one, where you find a situation where a teenager is in a very high-risk environment. For example, if a teenager is working in a bar, especially those girls who have delivered, for example, chances of them becoming pregnant are very high. So we handle case-by-case situation, but generally we don't promote contraceptive use.
Of course, it's a reality that our girls are becoming pregnant at a very tender age, even as far as age 13, 14, 15. So it's a decision that we need to make as government.
The government has instituted a number of national legal and policy frameworks to end teenage pregnancy and child marriage, and recently the National Strategy to Curb Child Marriages and Teenage Pregnancies 2022-2023 to 2026-2027 was launched.
You know very well that in almost all parts of this country, child marriage is practiced. So the act is helping us to eradicate child marriage. Where we've not done well is ensuring that all government agencies really scale up our efforts in terms of dealing with these cases.
Teenage pregnancy carries huge implications on the social and economic development of the country and may hinder efforts to achieve national development goals and the UN's Sustainable Development Goals.
Of course, the government is spending money for health care for teenage pregnancy. These girls have to go to hospital to deliver. These girls have to get antenatal care. That's a cost.
The amount of money government loses, both in terms of health costs, but also education costs, ultimately. And the last figure I heard about was almost more than $150 million a year. That is an estimation, which is actually a tremendous cost. If you look at our revenue, country revenue, you find that that's a very big problem.
Teenage pregnancy also accounts for 22.3% of school dropouts among girls aged between 14 to 18 years. In December 2020, the Ministry of Education and Sports instituted a new policy that requires schools to readmit teenage mothers after they have given birth.
As a district, we've not sat behind. Having got these statistics, this day, every term, we move out to the different schools and sensitize. We inform the parents that even though the child has given birth, or even though she's seen that she's a little big, please give this child another opportunity to study once again.
However, apart from Jen, none of the girls interviewed for this story wants to go back to school.
I want to go back to school. My dream is to become a nurse.
I will not return to school. I want to have a business of frying chips. I just want to work and support my child or to be heard as a worker.
If I get money, I will go for skills education and learn how to plait hair or become a tailor.
Despite the laws and policies in place, the vice of teenage pregnancy seems to be growing. Fatia Chiange, the Executive Director of Center for Health, Human Rights and Development, or CEHAD, says the government needs to consciously implement these laws and policies.
I think the important question is, why are these policies and strategies that should help us end teenage pregnancies are not being implemented? Firstly, it's because many of them are being contested despite being approved for a good cause. Increasingly, we need to get our religious leaders and cultural leaders to appreciate the realities of Uganda. While we might completely categorize teenage pregnancy as an immorality issue, we need to be thinking about what is it going to cost us 10, 20 years down the line.
This is not a one-man show. Everybody has to get involved in this whole equation. You see, we shouldn't just bury our heads in the sand. This is a real big problem in the country. Poverty levels are still what? Still high. So we are going to have a generation of people who are uneducated, who are poor, who are dependent, because it's you who is paying taxes to ensure that these people get drugs into what? These centers. So this thing will propagate for many years in the country.
Ending teenage pregnancy will reduce the country's annual population growth rate. This, in turn, could lead to more welfare benefits for citizens to a tune of $2.4 billion in terms of purchasing power by 2030. Gillian Nantume, NTV,